Cool. Welcome to Be the Market Leader. And so, first, I think it's important as we're talking about rates. We've talked about the 50 basis points. We're talking about all this good stuff going on. And with that being said, jobs report is what's actually going through and what's making all the rates higher right now. All right. So, the Fed came out in anticipation with everything the Fed was doing. We actually saw rates go lower. And if anyone's been on any conversations that we've been having with the brokerage, right, we know that rates could potentially go lower, yet the banks, it's not in their best interest to do so, right? Because while they are getting money lent to them at a cheaper rate, if they go through and they start dropping rates too quickly, anyone that's gone through and has potentially purchased a home recently comes out and refinances, the banks are going to lose money at that point. And so it's not in their financial interest to actually lower rates anymore. But yet we've seen jobs. And the interesting thing when we talk about the jobs is this right here, it's labor over inflation. And I think that we've been in this time period, at least for the last couple of years, where we've been told inflation, 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 the dollar's not as worth as much as it was, and the cost of goods are going up, and all these things that were happening. And so we kind of just lived in this environment where we believed that inflation was the cause of what was happening. Well, here's the thing, inflation's been going down. Inflation's been going down for quite some time now. The cost of goods, right, has been dropping and dropping. And it's interesting. Like we could actually pull up some charts where we could actually go through it and look at, what is elevated and what has dropped. Yet a good majority of everyday goods has gone down. Yet the labor data is one of the big key metrics that we're looking at right now. Because again, while we're not rooting for this by any extent of the imagination, the issue that we're running into is that too many people are employed, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is. Too many people are employed, they're making decent money. And so it's not in the Fed's best interest to lower rates. And when we look at this thing, here's the graph. And so when we're taking a look at this is just monthly change of employment, right? They have to look at this on a monthly basis. And this was actually one of the reasons why they actually went 50 basis points to start, was because the jobs reporting didn't look as good as they thought it was going to look. And so there was a lot of people that were fearful, because here's the thing, if we go into a spiral with people losing jobs, that is a huge red flag for when we're going into a recession. So when we're looking at this thing, the big one that we have to keep in mind is construction. Construction is a real big indicator of like what's happening in the housing market, right? So when we think about this thing, and we're seeing that we've had this uptick in employment around housing, specifically building housing, then we know that we're not going down towards that recessionary period. So when we're looking at these different things and we're just talking about the jobs came back better than what we thought they were going to come back at, and we're actually seeing people employed, this is a good thing for Americans, yet it's not a great thing for rates. Okay. So this is kind of this double-edged sword that we're living in. We don't want our fellow Americans, right? Our neighbors, our family members, insert whoever here, to be losing their jobs. Yet, when we have this healthy of a job market, there's no reason for the Fed to lower the rates. Because keep in mind, while we deal with the highest price tag item in the United States, right? Housing. And we're going through, and that's what we're doing. The rate, and that's kind of what we think about, right? Is these rates, and they affect mortgage rates. This is just the cost to borrow money. This is people that are building businesses. These are people that are going through, they're doing expansion, they're doing all these different things. And as they're doing all these different things, it costs money, right? And so when we're looking through, the government, the Fed is no way incentivized to make the cost of money cheaper if people are doing well. All right. So, like, that's the whole thing that we're on right now. So, as we're looking at this thing, this is a huge indicator. If we start to see this thing right here start shrinking back the other way, that's going to be an indicator that some weird things are starting to happen. But when jobs are going well in a sector that has been really in a recession for years now, we're talking year three at this point, and jobs are still moving in a positive direction, the Fed's not incentivized. So, big thing. This is the reason why, if you're having conversations with anyone, they're like, "Oh my God, Fed dropped at 50 basis points, and yet interest rates are going up." Like, if you do find yourself in that conversation, this is what it is. It just means more Americans have jobs, and we're seeing it in sectors that actually really, really matter. We're seeing construction actually go up, and we're seeing that the people that are actually in a position to buy houses, we're actually seeing more and more of those people actually be able to afford homes. And so the federal government, the Fed, is not incentivized to drop rates whatsoever right now. Another interesting article coming through is 7 states are back to pre-pandemic inventory levels. And then it says these 3 states are likely next. So if we scroll through this thing, this is just Resi Club. This is a free article. I don't pay for this. But if we were to look at this one, active U.S. housing, we know this. We'll look at this when we get into Housing Wire, but we can see we're moving upwards. And what's also interesting, just if we're just paying attention at home, we can actually see this not many times during this year, right, during this season, that we actually see an uptick like we are for inventory coming on the market. Again, it's interest rate driven. But if we scroll through, here we go. 1 year change. So this is those 1 year. This is September 2023 rear view facing data versus September of 2024. We have 38% more inventory. 38% more inventory in Colorado than we did this time last year. So this is what we're going through, and this is actually a good thing. This is a good thing for many, many levels. We were in a very unhealthy market, right, in 2021, where we were going through, there's multiple offer situations. People were waiving all their contingencies. They were emptying out their savings accounts to be able to afford houses, right? Like all their reserves, they were actually spending on housing. The trend carried into 2022 and got kind of put on a hold when interest rates went like this, right? Like interest rates, and then they went quickest they've ever gone up in the history of mortgage rates is what happened in 22, which is how it spiked. It wasn't the highest number we've ever been to, but it was just the quickness of how it went up was the fastest. So we were sitting at 38% year over year increase for inventory. Well, if we were scrolling down a little bit more and we're talking about pre-pandemic, and remember, everything we talk about, we need to keep in mind pre-pandemic levels. 2019 is what we would consider a healthier, a normal market. Anything pre-2020, remember, 2020 we had COVID, 2021 we had really low interest rates. It carried into 2022, but then we had this huge spike in interest rates. 2023, they remained elevated. You're living in 2024 where the first half they were elevated, but now they're going down. They're spiking up a little bit, but it's been weird. We've lived in a very weird time for real estate recently. But now if we're looking at this thing, we have 4% more inventory today, right? And this is a month behind at this point, but today versus what we had in 2019. So this is interesting as we're going through, and we can actually see, and we've talked about this in different conversations, that this is truly where people are moving to right now, is this Northeast. Um, and when we were talking about just pandemic and these like digital nomads, if you will, where people were able to work from home and they were moving into the Sun Belt, they were moving into these areas. This is also going to get interesting, right? We saw Texas and we saw Florida. They had huge, huge spikes in sales, and now they're starting to build. Well, they started building pretty big, and right, you can see there's more inventory, 10% more in Texas, 9% more in Florida. It's going to get really interesting as we're going further, especially with the hurricanes, right? Super, super unfortunate. And yet, when we're looking at this thing, I think what we're going to see, and not that this is the topic for this conversation, but we're going to see a lot of things with insurance, right? And insurance, what's happening down there is definitely going to affect our insurance as well. Just so that everyone's well aware, we're going to see insurance go up. And so when we're looking at 9%, this is going to get interesting if you can't go out and get a loan on a home because you are in an area that is affected by natural disasters, right? We see this up in the mountains with us, right? Fires and different things where they're more hesitant to actually be able to give out insurance. Well, I actually think this number actually could go up even higher in Florida because they did build, and now that they've built higher, and if people are having a harder time getting insurance, this number could start getting elevated more and more. So we'll just have to watch this. Again, this isn't super bad that we're getting more inventory. It just means that we're going more into a balanced market. And as we go into a more balanced market, it gets better for us at the same time. And just so everyone's well aware, like a balanced market is better for us. It's not gangbusters like it was in 2021. If you had sellers and you knew that it was guaranteed to sell for the most part, it didn't matter what condition the home was, it was like put on the market and it's going to go. Then when you go into the buy side of that, people with the interest rates, they were super low, so they could pretty much afford anything. We had free money in 2021. In a balanced market, guys, this is where it gets interesting because your services actually matter. You're probably going to be looking at more houses. Both parties are more willing to come to the table and they're going to be more apt to have conversations so that it's a win-win for both of them, both the seller and the buyer. Um, so it's going to be good. And I think that when we're getting deeper into this, what's also going to get interesting is I read an article today and I almost put it up, but it frustrated me too much to bring this article up. And it was just about like, are real estate agents overpaid and do you need them anymore? It was essentially the article. And it was kind of interesting because they talked about how this 30-year-old, and they called out that she was in her 30s, and it was her and her roommate, and they were selling their condo, and how firstly they went and they found a real estate agent and paid them $100 to put it in the MLS, which is illegal in Colorado. Like that's limited agency. We don't have that in Colorado. But they paid an agent to put it in the MLS for $100. I said that's actually probably the hardest thing is that real estate agents went out there and they've created this environment where they have the keys to all the data, even though it's not their data, it's our data, which was interesting. And they paid $100 and they went to a real estate lawyer to actually write up the contracts. They paid for professional photos, but they did pay the buyer's agent. And then they didn't say how much they paid the buyer's agent, but they made sure to put in the article that because of the NAR settlement, they felt empowered to actually give the buyer's agent less money than what they traditionally would have. But it's going to be interesting. Like once we move into a market where there's more negotiations and there's a lot more happening, and there's not three, four offers on some houses, we're going to get into a position where people are looking for buyer's agents. They're looking for listing agents. They're going to want to do business with you. So I'm kind of curious on as these inventory keeps rising and rising, we start going towards more of a balanced market. When we start getting to these like 6 to 5.5% interest rates, that's going to be the huge driver of this, to where people are comfortable buying houses, but yet there's still not a frenzy on homes. And as homes are still coming on the market, we're getting more inventory. It's going to be kind of a fun market to deal with. But let's get into Housing Wire. So home purchase settlement hits the highest level in 2 years. So thank you, Fed. Thank you, 50 basis points. Thank you, all of these news articles that have come out that have super behind the times, yet we know that they've done the heavy lifting for us. All of these articles have gone out and they have sparked our buyers' attention. So consumer confidence towards purchasing a home increased in September to the highest level in more than 2 years to lower mortgage rates. So this is big, everyone. And this is the thing. This is the perception that's out there. And what's interesting is where Elizabeth and I sit in the office, right? We get to hear our vendor partners have conversations. And one of the conversations that I feel like I hear over and over again, at least on the lending side, is people call and they say, hey, I heard mortgage rates have gone down. And then Mitch has to say something along the lines of, yes, they have gone down, but over the last couple of days, they've actually gone up a little bit. And here's the thing, that's not in the storyline. CNN, Fox, YouTube, Twitter, that's not what's being reported. What's being reported right now is interest rates are lower. 50 basis point drop. They've done the heavy lifting. Now we just have to make sure that we're inserting ourselves into the conversation to be the real estate economist of choice. So when people are reaching out and they're wanting to have conversations, they're thinking about us. Like that's where we're at right now. And when we start talking about seasonality, here's the thing. I think seasonality has been crushed in our industry due to the fact of the affordability of money. Everything that is happening, we've had people sitting on the sidelines and they've been waiting, they've been waiting. There's other people that have had motivating factors that have come into their life, right? Death, divorce, marriage. They're having a bigger family, right? Something that's going on where they're actually having to go out and buy houses, sell houses, right size, if you will. And yet, when we're going through and we're looking at these different things going on, there's also people that are actually going out and they're buying and selling because the locked in effect is actually starting to fade. I think people are actually coming around and realizing that 3% interest rates are a thing of the past. We'll never see them again. 5% is closer. Yes, we can do buy downs. We can do all kinds of things to get you closer to that number. I just had a buyer that was quoted at like 4.4 on like 1 point something is what the dollar amount was. But yeah, these are the conversations that we need to be having. So here's your purchase sentiment. This is what gets interesting. Like when we're going through and we're looking at this, this is what they were just talking about. This is the highest home buying sentiment in forever, right? Like we're looking at this thing. But here's where it gets interesting. We were pretty much lower than the basement, right? Like when we're talking about this, yes, it's good. But here's the thing. It's we were dealing with such low levels where so many people were thinking that we were just in like the worst housing market ever that it doesn't take much to move this. So we have come up, but now we're just in the basement. And so we're just going to kind of monitor this and kind of going through it. So 81% of respondents said it's a bad time to buy a home, down only 2% points from the previous month. Meanwhile, the share of those who said it's a bad time to sell a home was 35%, which is just flat. It says the recent shift in the attitude towards mortgage rates is pushing overall housing sentiment higher. So again, it's mortgage rate driven, it's cost of money driven. It's what is my monthly payment going to be? It's not that people believe that buying a house isn't the greatest financial benefit that you're going to have. It's the number one asset that most Americans have in their life. It's this: what is my monthly payment going to be? We know that in what Jefferson County, I think it's like 46%. 46% of someone's take home is actually going towards housing right now. So when they're going through, that's what they're weighing. It says last month when the Federal Reserve cut the Fed fund rate by 50 basis points, a record 42% of consumers said they expected mortgage rates to decline in the next 12 months. We don't know, but that's the thing, guys. These are what your people are thinking. Your people are thinking that rates are going to keep coming down. What are we doing to keep them educated? Do we have them on a smart plan? Are we going through? Are we sending out text messages? Are we making phone calls? What are we doing to have these conversations with them? So then it goes through and says, have higher mortgage rates already revised and reversed the housing demand? All right. So this is Logan Motoshami. And this was Friday, review facing data. Like we're going through here and we're looking at it. And it's going in and saying, like, all right, have we already put the brakes on with numbers going up because of what is happening with jobs? Are we seeing a halt, right? Federal Reserve cut rates on September 18th. Bond yields headed higher, but we have remembered that mortgage rates have already made an almost 2% lower than they were in the highs of 2023. Cool. Like we know this. And so since the Fed cuts, we've also seen significant economic data lines beat estimates, which is not good. Like good for America, bad for rates. When they're going through and they are beating everything and we have a great economy, the Fed is not interested in making money cheaper because everything looks good. Why lower what it costs to borrow money if everything is looking on the good side of things? So we're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to talk about mortgage spreads, but purchase application data says rates have ticked up this week noticeably, and it should break our winning streak of 6 straight weeks for consecutive purchase app gains. And it says last week we had 9% year over year growth in purchase apps, which made it back to back weeks of positive year over year data. So when we're going through and we're looking at this thing, here we are, right? Here we are, 2024. We have beat 2023. And it's kind of starting to flatten out a little bit. Like this isn't like a huge spike. We're going to have to just see what happens this week because interest rates are higher this week. So next week we'll be able to go through and we'll get a better feel for what this is looking like. Yet again, people are going through, they're getting on Twitter, they're getting on YouTube, Fox, CNN, insert whatever news source here. And again, I'm still seeing 50 basis point Fed cuts that are late to the game, right? They're still talking about it. They're still saying positive sentiment. They're still saying real estate agents believe that things are starting to break and get busy. Like this is national news that's coming through where they're still reporting on this. We don't know which one of our consumers is watching the TV, listening to the radio, scrolling through their phones, and they see this headline and it makes them act. So when we're going through, we just still need to be making sure while we know interest rates are starting to go up a little bit, there's still some of the lowest interest rates that we've seen in a very long time. And we know that we have different levers that we can pull to drop their interest rates even lower. And so, how are we positioning ourselves to have the conversations with our people when they are thinking about buying and selling real estate? Because here's the thing, we know that this is about being in emotional proximity to people when they are thinking about buying and selling. That's it. That's why we start talking about 36 touches and we start talking about the winter of renewal and how do we get back into relationship with people. And this is the best time of year, right? We got Halloween coming up. We have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, we have Hanukkah, we have New Year's, we have insert a lot of holidays here. And when we're going through and we're reaching back out to people and we're wishing them happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever, inviting them to trick or treat street, inviting them to breakfast with Santa, right? We're going through and we're getting back into proximity with them because we don't know when they're going to raise their hand looking to buy and sell real estate. And yet we do know that interest rates are better, more inventories on the market. There are different mechanisms that we have at our disposal right now to help our people win. We're going through and we're just looking at pending sales. So while we are higher, right, and we're looking at this thing, here's 2024, we might have started sloping down a little bit. So we're just going to have to monitor this line. And again, interest rates, different things that are happening, but this is a week behind. So we could see a spike here, and then like 2 weeks later, we could actually see this drop. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind. But this is 8.6% more single family homes are in contract than they were last year, which is a positive. Going through, we're just looking at inventory, and it says 3 weeks ago was the best week of inventory growth that we've had in 2024. And if we were to look at the inventory, it went from 731 to 734. And if we were to look at this same time, week over week data versus last year, went from 534 to 537. Way more inventory in the United States. And we already looked at the graph on where this inventory is, and Colorado is one of the leaders. We have a lot more inventory. There's a lot more options for our people at this point to actually get into a home. The all-time inventory bottom in 2022 was 240,000. We had our yearly peak at 734. And if we were to go back to this same time in 2015, 1.1 million homes, right? So here's the thing. When we're talking about getting back towards a balanced market, we're talking about more inventory. We also have more people in our population. So if we were able to get out of this thing and still live in 2015, 2024 with more homes is not a bad thing. I'm telling you guys right now, this is what we want for our buyers, for our sellers, and for our profession. We actually want to see more inventory hitting the market. And here it is, 37% more inventory than what there was in 2024. We know that we were in Colorado when we were looking at this thing. We're 4% over 2019, 38% over versus last year. So when we're going through and we're looking at this thing, here it is, 37%. and we're trending in the right direction. We want to beat these numbers. We want to beat 17, 18, and 19. We want to get up here. It's better for everybody. Just looking at your new single family listings, you can see that we are the highest we've been in 2 years. This is good. We do want to see this continue to tick up in the holiday season. We know historically speaking, this is when we start ticking down. Yet again, we are very interest rate driven. And what they didn't have in these 2 years, lower interest rate. Keep in mind, 2022, the second part of the second part of the year, the interest rates went up so high that that's when we started seeing people pulling homes off the market. 2023, we didn't see as many homes hit, and historically speaking, seasonality, homes start coming off the market again. Price cut percentage. Here we are sitting right here in the middle in between 23 and 22. We're at 39.5%. We know, historically speaking, 1/3 of all homes are going to take a price cut every year. 2022, right? This is the interesting one. This one is so high just because interest rates. Again, you can see this. You can actually see when interest rates started to rise as quick as they did and people were price cutting. We had motivated people. Maybe they were under contract. Maybe something else was going on in their world and they had to start cutting prices quickly. 2023, we just see more seasonality, right? We didn't see any real big changes. 2024, here we are, same thing again. No real big changes. It's just more seasonality. So what do we got going on? We got Fed presidents talking right now. They're going to be talking about the jobs report and then what their predictions are going forward. They're going to talk about CPI and PPI inflation. Again, we care a little bit about inflation, but mostly about jobs. And they're going to go through, and what we'll see is purchase application data, what's happening with this. So if we were to look at it, let's just go look at 1 month. So here's 1 month worth of data, right? We're going September to October 7th. This is obviously as of yesterday. And so as we're going through, we're higher than we were a month ago. All right. So I think that for us, we need to understand this. We are still higher than we were a month ago. 3 months, we're lower. 6 months, we're lower. 1 year, guys, we're still lower. So while things are going up and we see this, right? We look through and we look at conforming loan, we're at 6.3, and FHA, we're at 6.021. We know that we have different mechanisms, especially when we're going through and we're talking about concessions. And these concessions are able to buy down these rates. So this is what we need to truly be looking at right now is we're going to see people, they're going to raise their hand. Hey, I heard on the news 50 basis points. I heard interest rates are lower, whatever. Then we're going through, and while we know we need to be able to partner them with a lender, that we're able to actually get them even lower rates because of the different mechanisms that we have in play. Going through, let's look at Altos data. All right, so let's look at Arvada, the brokerage that's in Arvada. So we're going to talk about Arvada median list price. We're at $775,000. We've seen a little bit of an uptick here. Yet, if we're looking at the new listing data, we're at 759. So it's coming down. Price per square foot, we're going to call this flat. Yeah, it's fluctuating a little bit, but our price per square foot, we're just going to call it flat for fun. But our average days on market, 71. Guys, this is what is more concerning to me. We're at 71 days is our average days on market. It's taking all the data. It's talking about the homes that were underpriced. It's talking about the homes that were priced right. It's talking about the homes that are significantly overpriced. And they're sitting on the market for 71 days. 71 days, right? We're talking 2+ months versus 50 days. So less than 2 months, not by much, but it is. It's less than 2 months for median days, right? This is where we're taking out all the outliers and we're going to the right priced home. 49 days. This is what's important. We need to be taking information like this and presenting it to our sellers. They come in, they tell us that, hey, we're looking to buy a house, but we have to sell our house first, or we need to sell our house because we're moving to wherever. And I don't know about you guys, but I've had more conversations recently, and I'm hearing about more conversations where people are actually giving their net price. And what I mean by that is we're having more people come to the table and say, I need to make X amount of dollars on the sale of this house. And I don't know if you guys are experienced this conversation, but I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot of other agents that are having this conversation as well. And so we got to go back to what their motivation is and going through and saying, yes, I totally 100% understand. Yet, if we price your home at this price point, which will be X amount of dollars, X amount of percentage, depending on um, what affluency that you're talking to and the demographic of the seller that you have, and actually be able to show them if we overprice the home, your house is going to sit for over 2 months longer than the home in the same neighborhood, right? When we're going through it's 50 days versus 71 days. And so having these conversations, then you can show them that in that 71 days, 62% of all homes had a price cut. So not only is your home sitting for longer, but it's sitting for longer and we're not getting you your price. We're actually have to drop the home price down. 62% of all homes in Arvada had a price decrease. Price increase, this number is getting lower, which also doesn't truly excite me. But as we're going through and we're looking at this thing and we go back to this, right? 38% more inventory this year over last year. And then we look at this is telling me that we're not seeing builders build as quickly, right? They don't have a bunch of stuff that is, sitting on the market that they're not going through and they're not pushing as hard. Phase two, phase three, phase four, because that's what this would be. They take the same model and they put a price increase on it, right? They say, oh yeah, this model used to be, $600,000, but now we're in phase two. We sold enough of these, so now we're selling it for 620. We're seeing less than this. And so this doesn't shock me as we're looking at this, especially when we're talking about we have 38% more homes. We're probably not going to see builders get super excited to put a bunch of inventory out there. And it's probably slowing down for them because there's more inventory for people to go look at, and it's not as constrained as it was. 7% of homes relisted. Totally get that, right? We're seeing this with the cost of money being what it is. We're going to see people that aren't going to get to the finish line. Inventory's 282. Monthly rent is going down a little flat, but kind of going down 2850 in Arvada. And then our market action report of 42, which looks like pretty in line. We're still in the seller's market. It looks like what it was last month. And yet we're getting closer and closer to a buyer's market. We'll see this with more and more inventory coming out. And I do want to talk about this just because it came up in the top producers mastermind. So I think it's interesting. While this one in particular didn't come out, we did have this conversation about tie-in arrangements. And so one of the biggest tie-in arrangement issues that a brokerage had was this MV Realty, which is now bankrupt. They filed for bankruptcy. What these guys were doing was kind of interesting. Back when people were looking for money, this company went out and they offered, hey, we'll give you up to $5,000. That number is important. We will give you up to $5,000. And with that, what all we want in return is that in the next 40 years, if you sell your house, we get to list it at 3% commission. So they put in a tie-in arrangement that said, hey, we'll give you up to 5K, up to $5,000. And if you sell your house in the next 40 years, 40, we get to list it and our commission will be 3%. So state regulators came out last month and they said this is predatory. And they went through and they were really just looking at this. So Marsha Waters came out, right? Marsha's the hammer. And she came out and she took away the brokerage license. So I don't know how many agents were at this brokerage, but none of them are employed by this brokerage anymore because this brokerage is gone. And when we kind of go through, they start doing the math, right? They're like, well, let's just assume that the Colorado median home price right now is about 594 as of August. And they're going to nearly recoup $18,000 for giving someone around 5K or less. So great business model for MV Realty. Yet, as we're going through, what we can see is 12 states at this point, because this was a nationwide company, 12 states have gone through And they have said, no, we're not allowing these to be honored. This 40-year rule is gone. And we're actually seeing these people kind of disappear. It says they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 33 states as of September 23. And they had more than 500 agents in the nation that were under them. So kind of interesting as we're going through and we're seeing different stuff like this. This was a big deal because what was happening was in the last 2 years when people were going to sell their house, they were remembering that they actually got this $5,000 loan from this company. And I think it was something like 900. There were over 900 houses that were affected. I don't remember. There it is. 900 Colorado homeowners actually had this lien on their home. They actually borrowed up to 5K from MV Realty and guaranteed them a 3% commission in the next 40 years if they ever sold their house. So kind of interesting stuff as we're looking through everything.